Tolerators. This is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie Katona, your weekly look at everyday misogyny. Today, we have another friend the algorithm gods brought to my feed. BJ is a film reviewer, writer, editor, co-host of the This Ends at Prom podcast, and a badass TikTok follow. She is here to talk to me about gender expression and how everyday misogyny tries to keep us in small gender boxes. Thanks so much for being here, BJ.
Thank you so much for having me.
Every day, TikTok becomes one of those devils that I partner with because I'm like, but it brings me such cool people. Like, you can't not participate.
Every time I think that the discourse on whatever is the topic du jour, that I'm going to just finally delete the app off my phone, like I can't deal with it, and then I'll get like one video that is so brilliant or so funny that I'm like, they got me again.
Yes. It's like how I tried to quit Coca-Cola until the pandemic happened. And then I was like, well, if I buy craft soda, that's not real soda, that's quality. And then it was just a slow, slippery slope to downing 5 Coca-Colas a day. So I think we should just start with letting you introduce yourself since it's your first time here so our audience gets to know you.
Oh, sure. My name is BJ Colangelo. I write a lot about movies, but specifically I love to analyze the way that movies impact us socially, and culturally, and personally. That's my favorite thing in the world to do. So because of that, I'm a chronic overthinker. It means I think a lot about humans and society and our relationship to each other and the world around us, which also means I think a lot about gender. I am a very proud fat femme. That is definitely part of my identity. I'm a lesbian. I have a very, very cool, gigantically tall wife named Harmony. She is a intentionally non-op trans woman. She co-hosts The Sons at Prom with me, where we talk about teen girl movies from the perspective of me, an apologist, and her, someone who missed all of those movies. So we talk about gender and misogyny and the patriarchy and all of these topics. Like, that's just like daily conversation for us because it impacts literally every aspect of our existence.
Yes.
And so I think about it a lot.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'm like, how often can I comment on BJ's TikToks that I'm right here with you? Here I am. I agree with all of this.
You are allowed as many comments as you would like. I will not be annoyed ever. It sure beats the people that are like, actually, I think you're fat, ugly, and therefore you're not allowed to talk. And it's like, cool guy, you wasted a lot of time for me to just hit block. You could have saved us both the trouble.
I know, because the internet, again, in my mind, I'm like, the internet could be so perfect if we just didn't let white straight men on it, and then it would just be ours. But I like, because there was a good point in time where every time I was going to the movies, it was to see a movie that was for queer femmes, and you had seen it like a week before me because that's the cool perk of being you. And I was like, I have to save this because I haven't gotten to see Love Lies Bleeding yet, but I desperately want to know. But it also, like, your first sentence would let me know that it was going to be everything that I wanted it to be. So I still got affirmed.
I'm always happy to do that. My goal in life is to let anyone who is even tangentially excited about queer femme cinema know that, like, yes, we are good, or no, this is bad.
I saw Twisters over the weekend, which is not queer femme cinema, but the woman who plays Kristen Stewart, the bodybuilder in Love Lies Bleeding, was
Katie O'Brien.
Katie O'Brien was a surprise in Twisters, and I was the only person in my group who had seen Love Lies Bleeding, so I was like, and they're like, what's wrong with you? I was like,
We get double dose in that because we get Katie O'Brien and we get Sasha Lane. So, like, and I knew Katie O'Brien was in there because I'm a weirdo who follows Katie O'Brien on all forms of social media. I did not know Sasha Lane was there, and I got very excited. I was like, we got two in this movie, in this very, historically masculine leaning movie. Hell yeah, that is progress.
Hell yeah. I was like, good news, everyone. Glenn Powell, not the bad guy, not with these two on their team.
Good news. You don't have to feel guilty about how good he looks in the rain.
Oh my God. But I think we should also, after that brilliant introduction to who you are and why you're so cool, talk about our own experience with growing up trying to figure out what gender expression means. Because as a child of the 90s and the early aughts, no one was talking about what gender expression was or how I felt as a cis woman walking around the earth with what I was wearing or what I was doing to exude femininity or anything like that. This is all very new.
Yeah, so I have a very weird and complicated relationship with my gender presentation, but in ways that I think will make sense to anyone who has ever seen what I look like. So if you don't know what I look like, I'm on Instagram. My handle's my name. You'll find me. So I grew up in very hyper feminine worlds. The two in particular is that I was a champion competitive baton twirler for 20 years. I went pro when I was like 9. So that is a world of sequins and glamour, and it's basically if gymnastics and dance had a baby and threw stuff. Like that's baton twirling. And I also did child beauty pageants. And a thing that I like to stress, because the world of child beauty pageants has obviously been dominated by toddlers and tiaras, like very abusive sorts of organizations for children. I wanted to do this because I am a forever dyed in the wool theater kid, and we did not have community theater at that age, but we did have, you can wear a pretty dress and stand on the stage and talk into a microphone. And that was everything to me. And that's all I wanted to do. So I was obsessed with doing pageants and doing baton. But at the same time, I would never have described myself as a like quote unquote girly girl. Like I loved Barbie and I forever love Barbie, but also I was like a gross kid. Like I was like play in the dirt, find frogs, disgusting kid. And so I always had this very weird relationship with gender where I loved wearing dresses, but they were always filthy. Or I loved having my hair curled, but by the end of the day, it was always just like ratty and turned into a giant's nest. My hair is a giant nest right now because that's just how it functions. And it's very strange when you're in those environments because you become aware of beauty standards even if you don't have a name for them. And this is like a very weird kind of dark place, admittedly, but my first understanding of beauty standards was when John Benny Ramsey was killed.
Oh, wow.
And it was because I'm the same age, like we were, born the same year. And so I was doing pageants and I would go to, Walgreens or the grocery store or whatever. And her face was everywhere on all of these magazine covers, but I didn't know why. And no one was going to be like, yeah, you see that pretty girl? She was killed. Like, they're not going to do that to me as a 6-year-old. I saw her everywhere. And I was like, why does she get to be everywhere? I don't understand this. And I was in a store with my pageant coach, and we were picking out a dress. And I found this dress that had like polka dots and I thought it was so cute. And I was like, I like this dress. And she was like, ooh, I don't know about that one. It might be a little too loud. And then she finds this like white dress with big puffy sleeves. And she goes, oh my God, look at this dress. This is like a John Bonet dress. This is really cute. Oh, I think you should wear this. And like I associated that dress and that girl in the magazines, and I didn't understand why the dress I liked was not good enough, but the dress that she likes is good enough. And so I was like, that's weird. Okay. And it was me realizing I don't fit into femininity the way like this little girl does. And it wasn't until like, I don't know, probably 6 months of this that I finally was like, who is she? Am I going to be at the pageant with her? And my mom had to like sit me down and be like, no, and explain the situation. It was horrifying. And then, of course, like she was very good and assured me, like, you don't have to worry about this. This was a very specific incident. It was a tragedy. Like, there's not like a beauty queen killer or anything like that. But yeah, it's a sad day because she was a lot like you and she did pageants, and that was also the moment I realized that like subscribing to these gender roles don't save you. Like subscribing to what society determines makes you like the best of the best in terms of like American exceptionalism or whatever, which is just blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful, perfect, clean, like all of that, it that still will not save you. And having that realization as a 6-year-old, wild. A wild way to then walk through the world. Uh because it was a very hard and intense lesson. And then, you get to the 2000s and there's just this massive backlash, just this fat like nonsense. I've always been a bigger girl because my boobs are the size of people's heads, so therefore even when I was conventionally thinner, my body looked bigger. Like, this is when we have rap songs where people are like terrified their butt is getting big, and now we're in a culture where people like get BBLs and pay for their butts to get big because beauty standards change. And throughout the 90s and the 2000s, it was thin, 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 and I did not fit into that role either. It didn't matter what I did. I was never going to fit into that brand of femininity. And then I was also, still hyper feminine. I always like to say that I'm hard femme, like I'm feminine with an edge to it. And that's when like anti-fem hate started happening, like 2006 through 2009, when people were like, I hate Megan Fox. Well, why? Because look at her. Well, she didn't do anything. Like, you hate her because she's beautiful. Like, that's anti-fem hate. Or like, I think people like Lindsay Lohan and Paris Hilton are like dumb bimbos. And it's like, what did they do to you, pal? Like, they're just young women having fun and they happen to be wealthy. Like, they don't have to be role models to you. They're just living their lives. It's not their job to appeal to you. And so when you grow up in those time frames, like, it really will fuck you up. And it did fuck me up for a very long time.
We talked about it in our young adult literature episode about how when we were growing up, all of a sudden everything that was what we would consider quote unquote, oh, that's so girlhood, was like something that opened you up to ridicule and being made fun of. Like, you weren't meant to be girly. Like, no one wanted to be Sharpay in High School Musical except for maybe me. And I feel like I truly, I'm the eldest granddaughter on my mom's side. There were 6 of us core cousins, and then 2 more would come later down the road when I was a teenager. But my grandmother and my aunts and uncles didn't have any time to treat like girls and boys like boys. They're like, there are 6 of you, roll around in the yard, do that. Like, be in the basement, play how you play, and do that. And it wasn't until my boobs came in early that it was like, oh, we have to start treating Natalie like a girl. And I remember swimming in my older cousin on my dad's side. She lived in an apartment that had a pool, and we were swimming, and she popped out of the pool and screamed at my mom, Aunt Cindy, you're going to have to get Natalie a bra soon. Like, the titties are in. And I just remember like the wash of shame coming over me. I'm like, number 1, I'm already a fat kid in a bathing suit. Number 2, like, I'm 11 and a half. Like, what do you mean my boobies came in? And how people started to change how they would talk to me or like interact with me. One of the first ways I remember being like, oh, that's what it feels like to be treated differently as a girl, was when we had a friend that through some family circumstances, he had to spend the night with us on Monday nights. And then we would get him to school the next day. And we were in middle school or whatever. And I came down in my pajamas, and my mom like grasped my arm with like the fear of God in her and went, where's your bra? And I was like, we're getting ready for bed. And she's like, you can't just be walking around the house without a bra. Anyone could be over. Anyone could be looking in through windows. Like, kids are coming in and out of our house all the time. You have to be brought up at all times. And I just remember being like, why? It's like, no, what? But it's not comfortable.
Yeah.
And she's like, when you're laying in bed, you can take off your bra. It's an end of the night activity only.
That's very real, though.
Yeah. And how that feeds into like my need to be like, quote unquote, TikTok ready if I'm going to make content or something, or like how I'm going to get the mail, or how I'm going to go to present myself at the grocery store. To my mom, presenting yourself in like full outfit, full face, brushed hair was how you either got noticed by the right people or the wrong people at least could accept you and ignore you while you were like walking through life.
And I think something else that I don't think it's talked about a lot is the way that the intersections of body type also affect your femininity, in the sense that fat women are not afforded the same realm of femininity as people who are straight sized or have more conventional body types, in the sense that we are immediately masculinized if unless we are presenting with some sort of hyper femininity, um, because fatness is intrinsically linked to racism, and we I don't think we need to, let me rephrase that, but like I don't think it's a surprise to say that like black women are also masculinized regardless of their body size. So of course that means fatness will also be masculinized. Which is also like the cruelest irony, considering when people talk about like androgyny, they usually mean removing any noticeable signs of femininity, which tend to be curve. So we just live in a world of conundrums and hypocrisies and contradictions all the time. But you're very much right. Like I had a very similar experience of like I would have my friends who were much thinner than I am. They would just put on like a pair of sweatpants and like you roll the band a few times because it was the 2000s, and like a spaghetti strap tank top, no makeup, messy bun, and they could go to the store. That is not something that was ever going to be afforded to me. If I don't look like I am done up and clean, the assumptions that are made about me because of my body are that I am, that I smell, that I'm gross, that I'm lazy, all of these things, because they already assume that about me just because I'm a fat person. And when like none of those words are things that we ascribe to femininity. So unless I am putting in the extra effort to present that femininity, I'm denied access to it.
Yeah. And for the longest time, and it still feels like this, but there's nothing that fat women can do that's correct at any given moment.
No.
No, if I'm wearing shapeless baggy clothing to hide my form, that's not sexy. If I'm dressing too sexy, it's like, who does she think she is? And straight women, skinny women and people of more conventional sizes, there's also very little that skinny women can do right too. But it was always like the checklist in my head to be like, did I brush my hair? Do I look like I at least showered? If I can't do a full face of makeup, can I at least put on moisturizer or wear big sunglasses? And also like, it also like gave me this like fat girls never say die attitude. So it's like, if we're hiking at the dunes, I'm in a full face of makeup and I won't be the first person to sit down. Like if ever, I will wait until the very last person is like, should we sit down for a drink of water, to literally collapse into that sand?
Oh, that's real. Like I'm very similar. It's the summertime. I've gone to multiple pool parties. I have a full beat every time. My head does not go under that water because everybody else can lose all their makeup and get out of the pool and just wear their cute little wraps on, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, you look so cute." The second that my makeup goes away, it becomes way more noticeable. Like, oh, I think that you are ugly because you are fat. At least the makeup hides these things. And to be very, very clear, I don't do this solely for external validation or anything like that. I do this because I really like it, and I'm also just I happen to be hyper aware of the way I'm perceived in the world around me, because that's also another thing, is that I think people don't believe that fat people, or in my case, like also lesbians, can express hyper femininity without it being some sort of a performance. Which, I mean, it all things being equal, all gender performance is a performance. Period. It doesn't matter if you align with the gender you were assigned at birth or what have you. Like all expression is a form of performance. It is a performance that we are just in control of. And it's just very frustrating to know all of the outside influences and the outside projections that are put on us for the decisions that we make. And sure, they're the trad wife types that I think are putting it on as an act. that I don't think are feeling fully like this is what they want, or they've convinced themselves that they are. There are absolutely people who subscribe to specific gender roles because they think it's what they're supposed to do and not what they want to do. Um, but I very much know what I want to look like. I know how I want to present myself to the world, and it just happens to be in a way that also comes along with all of this other baggage.
I know. While you were going over that, I remembered, and I can't remember what movie it was, but you recently got really cool eyeshadow that was themed towards a movie or a show. And I was like,
Oh, it's Maxine.
yes, it was Maxine, which again left the theater before I could get my ass into a theater to see it. So I have to wait until it streams. Thank you, Deadpool and Wolverine, which I still will be going to, even though I'm petty mad at you. Like, I'm petty mad. But yeah, and it's that too. And I think that that's another thing that fat women, queer women, and now truly any woman or any femme presenting human is thinking about at all times is like, how do I justify how much effort I put into how I look today without being like, yeah, because I wanted attention, or yeah, because I wanted to do this. Like, we're always playing this game of like, don't worry, I didn't put on a full face of makeup to look pretty. I just wanted to look natural like the Kardashians, and and just like being like, I'm too cool for my own makeup, and the justification of everything that we do to express gender.
Oh, absolutely, because we're all expected to look a certain way, but you can't acknowledge why you look that certain way. I've made TikToks in the past before where it's like, hey, I have nothing to say. I just look real good today. And if other people don't see this, it feels kind of like a waste. But there are also plenty of days where I just, I see like a makeup tutorial or some sort of thing. I'm like, that seems kind of cool. Let me try that out. And then I'm just like sitting at home with a full beat on playing video games and no one sees me because that was something I did for me and I wanted to try it out. And I don't feel like being perceived today. Other people don't need to see this. I know I did a good job.
A friend, after I talked to her about our Young Adult Lit episode, she said, well, first off, through some horrific oversharing, another friend had to alert me that I was being groomed, not treated specially. And I called my best friend from childhood and I was like, can you believe that I didn't even pick up on that? I'm 34 years old. I podcast about everyday misogyny every day. And an outsider had to be like, Natalie, you were being groomed. My God, that's not a cute story. And my best friend said, well, yeah, but think about like the Princess Diaries and all the shit that we read and watched as kids. Like, you have an insane amount of main character energy. So, of course, you thought in your head, like, oh, this could only happen to me because I'm fat girl Mandy Moore. And of course, that's why he's talking to me like that. And that's how I feel like about the whole performance part of makeup and dressing up or whatever. I dress to theme for whatever event I'm doing that day because I am the main character in my own movie of the day, which I'm sure TikTok would diagnose me with something because of that. But it's what I'm doing. Yeah, and I refuse to apologize.
Of course. And I feel very, very similar. And I've also had these kind of like aha moments throughout life. I do not subscribe to the idea of universal female experiences. I don't think that they exist. And I also would like love for the people who are like, weird TERFs and transphobes who are like, you're not a woman until X, Y, or Z thing happens. Why it's always fucking tragedy and trauma and awful. Why do you want people to hurt? People can sit with that. Regardless, back on topic. One of the experiences that I have found, though, that many, many people who were socialized as young girls have experienced is that period of time between like 6th grade and freshman year when your body is starting to be as weird as it has ever been and you're starting to play around with, presentation and gender. You're dressed up to the nines, you're feeling good, you and your friends are, walking on the side of the road, going to the skate park, and somebody drives by and honks at you. And your instinct is not, fuck that guy. Your instinct is, oh my God, he honked at me. We're so cute. And then as an adult, you look back and you go, I was 12 and that person could drive a car at minimum they're 16. That was not like a cute story for me to have been through. That should not have made me feel really good. But we were not having those conversations to be like, hey, if somebody honks at you, they're a fucking creep. Don't be excited about that. We weren't having those conversations yet.
No, I think I was fully a sophomore in college before I stopped waving at men who were honking at me like, hey, what's up? And then people were like, my God, what are you doing? I'm like, what am I doing? That's a stranger. Like, ugh. And it's that whole, like, I also believe that, like, when you don't fit the molds of, like, classic Americana pretty, that the pressure that I put myself under to still feel classic Americana pretty and worthy gave me like a delayed adolescence to where I was so emotionally and physically immature about anything that came to like dating and sex and all of it, that it was like I was probably 25 when I shook off needing like constant validation from people outside of my home, that I was like pretty and girly and doing everything right. And I still get caught up in that, and that's my right.
Totally. And my boobs came in really early, and then because of that, there was this reputation or like this rumor or whatever that I was clearly a slut because, well, she has boobs, of course she's a slut. And I was very defiant about it, and I was like, okay, well, if you're going to say that I am, I'm going to do it, because I'm not going to be called horrible names and then not get the experience of like having orgasms that are not being done by myself. So I became hypersexual very early. And I also was very confused about my sexuality for many years because I had always thought that I was gay. Like as a very little kid, I was like, oh, I don't like boys. I like girls 100%. But then when puberty hit and people kept saying like that I was, clearly slutty because of what my body looks like, or the fact that I go by BJ, which of course junior high kids have like a field day with stuff like that. And then I like had sex with cis men and it didn't like completely gross me out. And that confused the hell out of me. Because, lesbians are also socialized to be a certain way. And lesbians are also told that there's a very specific type of, the media tells like, there's a very specific type of woman that is a lesbian. And it is like, butches and masks and the Rosie O'Donnell types. And they think men are gross. And that means if you are feminine in any way, shape, or form, or if you are not completely repulsed by men, that you cannot be a lesbian. And we know that that is not true. But in the 90s and early 2000s, like we were not really seeing any other options of how to live this way. And so it did like confuse the shit out of me for a very, very long time because there was no rule book for this. There's no guidebook. I'm trying to figure out a identity and a gender relationship and a sexuality that exists outside of the confines of the guidebook that doesn't exist, but we are all given a subscription to at birth. And it was very difficult. And it wasn't until like honestly when I went to college, like most people, like that's their experimental time. I went the other way into that, where I then became hyper aware of how people perceive lesbians and queerness and the danger that is ascribed to that. And so I went very, very hard into like, I'm going to see, maybe I'm not gay, maybe I am bi, maybe I am pan. Let's figure this out. And spent a lot of time with men, and it didn't enjoy my time. Like it was fun, don't get me wrong. Like sex feels great, period. Like it just does. That's a physiological response. But like emotionally, I was very unsatisfied. I was very unhappy, and I couldn't figure it out why, because I'm like, well, everything I've ever been told should tell me that I like this, and I don't. But I also can't be gay because I'm the feature twirler for the marching band, and I like to wear dresses and I like to do these things that I can't be. And it took me until like my early 20s until I finally was like, wait, femme lesbians exist, and also you can be femme lesbian and be really tough, and figuring all of this shit out. But it's like it should not have taken me that long. And I don't know, I'm thrilled with the way that I've been seeing progress happen, as evil as TikTok is. the ability to see so many other people, like as a young person, like a young person can log on and they can see me and see my brand of femininity, my brand of queerness, what it means, my story, how I got to where I am. And now they don't have to go through all of that trial and error that I had to. They're like, oh, nope, I agree with how she feels about things. That's how I feel. I don't need to go fuck a bunch of randos in the marching band in order to like figure some shit out.
Yeah, well, as you know, I'm currently going through all of the like, what does my sexuality actually look like now that I've decentered men at 34, which is exhausting for me. And I think that part of that whole like, I'm the main character of the story, I'm the main character of the movie meant that like, I should be gifted an all American boy. Plus, I had a father who chanted at me whenever he could because one of my cousins got pregnant early in life and unwed. So then that became like a huge turning point for him where whenever he got the chance, he would chant at my sister and I. You graduate high school, you go to college, you meet a boy in college, you graduate from said college, you marry that boy, and you have his babies. And it can only happen in that order and will only happen in that order. And there were no gay people around me. And my friend put it into such big perspective for me. She goes, no wonder you were so scared of being gay. Every time a gay person was brought up, there was always like yelling tragedy and violence to you. And I was like, oh, I was like, do you think that's what it is? She goes, yeah, your brain linked, oh, being gay means that you live some miserable existence that Sarah Jessica Parker described in The Family Stone when she was like, oh, yikes, they're deaf, black, and gay. Yikes-a-roni. And then Diane Keaton had to start screaming. And that's why I can't watch The Family Stone because it's so stressful. When people are like, The Family Stone's my favorite Christmas movie, I'm like, no, it's so stressful for me. But yeah.
That it makes complete sense because I've been speaking a lot about how like who's afforded what access to femininity or what have you. And like it was really, really difficult for me to embrace that I wasn't bisexual or pansexual, which are totally valid identities. They're just not mine. Like I've always been a lesbian and I should have just listened to my 5-year-old self who knew out the gate instead of wasting all this time that I did trying to like fit myself into a box that one, I was never going to fit into, and two, that I was never going to be afforded access to, even if I wanted it. Um, because I also thought it was like, there's this lesbian box and I don't fit into that. How can I be a lesbian if like there are so many men who desire me? Because we live in such a patriarchal world that the relationship to men is so prioritized and so emphasized that in order to break yourself from that, like it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of intentional action, but you can't make that intentional action until you're aware of where you fit within it or outside. And that's hard because there are so many external factors between, familial obligations or the media or friend groups or where you are at geographically, what access you have to people who already exist on the margins. Do you see them every day? And what's even weirder is that like I come from an extremely affirming home. My parents have no issues with queerness. They have had gay friends forever. They've known trans people for as long as I've been alive. Like none of this has ever been taboo in our household. And yet it still did not matter because the pressures from society and the world at large were so intense and were so massive and loud during my formative years that it was hard to see the forest for the trees.
Yeah. And because it just dawned on me that every time I have sex with a man, it programs me into being a trad wife. And I understood that that was why I stopped having sex with men to begin with, because I kept saying out loud, I don't like who I become after I have sex with a man, because then all I can do is focus on that man wanting to marry me and having his kids. And as soon as he leaves my bed or my home or my life, my brain immediately goes, we don't want kids. And we didn't want him on any of our paperwork. Stop letting your touch-starved hormones convince you that he was the end-all be-all. And it's because, again, it's playing that role of what everyone expected of me, of what like society expected of me, and movies and TV expected of me, and family expected of me. And when you become a woman well into her 30s who's like, I'm going to stop dating men and literally date anyone else, you get asked a lot of questions like, well, are you gay, or do you just have like a couple new gay friends and now you feel like that would be cool? Or, well, do you want to date women, or are you just like so traumatized from your exes you're willing to let them win? And really gross things that still give the messaging that like, sure, do whatever you want, but it's still men at the center of all of these decisions.
Yeah, and first off, like, thank you for sharing that with me. That's like a very brave and vulnerable thing, especially to say on a podcast, which is now going to be consumed by a bunch of people. So I want to commend you for that. But it's very real. Like, those sorts of scenarios were thrown at me as well when I finally was like, no, it's definitely not men at all. Like, it's not at all. Not even like a sometimes food. Like, never. We're not. I am a cookie monster, and I'm a cookie monster for women and women exclusively. And there were a lot of people that were like, well, that doesn't make sense to me because, you've had so many relationships with men, and, you've very vocally had sex with men and seemed to not be upset about it. So I don't understand that. And it's one of those things where it's so hard to explain because it's such a personal experience, and you know what it feels like. And it's sometimes hard to explain to another person, like how to make them feel what you feel, how to make them understand a situation that you have probably spent more time thinking about than anyone else on the planet, because it's your experience. And the true freedom that I've had is recognizing that no matter what, there are always going to be people who are not going to understand me, who are not going to believe me, who are not going to validate me. And that's fine, because that has been my experience with my gender. That has been my experience within, living in a patriarchal society, that no matter what, I will never be good enough for some people. There will be some people that are never going to be totally convinced of whatever it is that I'm doing. And I don't need them. Like, I think the true like liberation from the patriarchy is not needing external validation in any form for the decisions that you make. I'm aware of them. I'm aware of how people perceive me. I've just had to teach myself to not give a fuck and to not care. And, a big step for me that I took this year is, I went and visited my family. They live in Florida. We went to a lot of pool parties. My sister is a former bodybuilder. My sister's body is like the textbook conventionally attractive female form. And for many years, I would not wear a two-piece around her, not because I feel insecure, not because she's going to make me feel weird or I feel weird next to her, but because I knew that it like made other people feel uncomfortable, and other people would make comments and other people would have issues. And for me, like wearing a one piece or wearing a bathing suit with a cover up, that was my way of just like avoiding that situation. Now I don't care. Now I wear what I want to wear. And if somebody's bold enough to say something to me, they better be bold enough to understand I'm going to say something right back. And a lot of times people are not. People don't think you're going to say anything. They go learn, and they did. But yeah, truly realizing that like the way I present myself to the world is for me. The relationship that I have with my gender is for me. The relationship that I have with my wife is for us. And if other people want to get on board, that's cool. And I'm glad. And I would, invite them to it. If they have a problem with that, that is a problem that they can work through on their own time and their own dime, because I'm not doing it for them.
I was thinking, because like on my outline, I do have that like sometimes when you're fitting yourself into the gender boxes that are pre-subscribed by patriarchy, you're wearing that as an armor, but how we don't even have the luxury of it being armor, because the first rule of being like a female stand-up is to wear all black and to like literally dilute all femininity from you so that the people in the audience actually believe you deserve to be funny. Like, and all of it. And it's like, at the end of the day, I should get to wear a prom dress up on stage if that's what I want to wear. What if it's part of my bit? Because at the end of the day, it is all for me. And sweatpant days are for me. High glam days are for me. I think after COVID, people have seen my bare face more than ever because I'm like, if we're just sitting at your house watching a movie, you do not deserve my full glam. Like, we could be going out, we could be doing whatever, and I'm not doing full glam just to rewatch Schitt's Creek on your couch. And it's this whole, we just did an episode. It was a very long episode and a very long recording because me and my two friends had not discussed the album before we got on Hot Mics. But we just did an episode on the Tortured Poets Department, and it made me realize that the reason why people are so mad, the reason that men get so mad and so heated at Taylor Swift is that she centers them in a way that is detrimental to them, where it's like, oh, if you're constantly telling us that like you were gaslit or abused or sexualized at 19 by John Mayer or any of those things, that's still talking about us, which we should love. We should love that all of your music is about us, but it's about us in the bad way. And now people are like, wait a minute, my boyfriend also sexualized me when I was 18 years old and he was 27. What the fuck?
No, that's very real. And I think like, I like to call it it's the White Claw conundrum, which is that there are some men who viscerally hate White Claw. And the reason being is because it is the first time there has been a ready to drink, like can alcoholic drink that is not heavily coded as masculine the way that beer is. Beer and brewskis and all of that is very much coded as like, this is for men. Women drink cocktails. Men drink, like, you know, we call them girly drinks for a reason. And then White Claw came on the market, and it is a seltzer, something that is as like fun and summery and is coded as feminine, even though like literally anybody can drink a White Claw. It's just a alcoholic seltzer. But so many men view that now as a girly drink, even if it has the same alcohol level, if not more, than most of the beers on the market. But they hate it so much because it puts women on an even playing field. They can also play beer pong and drink White Claws. They can pound a bunch of these drinks and keep up with the boys the way that they couldn't if they were drinking hard liquor. It bothers them. Like, it upsets them because now we can drink as much and be at the same level of, you know, inebriation as they are. And so that extends to so many things in our world. Anything that is coded as feminine but puts women on an even playing field, men can't fucking stand it. And they have to demonize it. They have to make it feel lesser than. They have to talk shit on it. It's the reason why people, you know, our entire podcast, This Ends at Prom, is about teen girl movies. And we acknowledge the fact that there is a void in cultural criticism about these movies because they are viewed as lesser than. They are viewed as not as good because they are, quote unquote, for girls. And so absolutely, like, I am not a Swiftie by any stretch of the imagination. I have my fair share of criticisms of Taylor Swift, the person, but in terms of her music is concerned, I completely understand why so many people are so into it. And I totally see why men are so against her. And it's because she puts women on an even playing field. She gives them language they did not have to describe their experiences. And so now they can advocate for themselves, and men fucking hate it.
Yeah. And I think part of the problem with me just being like, wait, why wasn't I always on an even playing field as you to begin with is because I grew up with movies like Now and Then. And as soon as a woman tells me, like, I've never seen Now and Then, I'm like, what? I was like, no, you have to watch it. It's the perfect movie, and it has a banger soundtrack. And it's like, I was constantly fed these teen girl movies where the teen girls or the like adolescent middle school age girls were in charge of their entire destiny. And we're just like running around and kicking Devon Sawa, but then deciding 2 days later, you get to kiss me, Devon Sawa, and like being in charge the entire time. So again, it feeds into that main character energy of like, oh, I deserve all of this. And as soon as you because we talk about, we had an episode about how misogyny rips away and demonizes female joy, because as soon as you go, I deserve this, you're greedy and selfish and probably a whore. But if you're just like on the fringe of it, like, oh, I'll just be like one of these cool girls who's just like kind of at the party, but like doesn't feel like I belong at the party.
Hashtag not like most girls.
Exactly. It's the entire game that we play to still be on the even playing field, but now White Claw, which I don't even like White Claw because it doesn't taste like soda. I'm one of those White Claw
It doesn't.
haters.
It tastes like chemical fruit alcohol,
Uh-huh.
which fortunately I enjoy. But I'm also a garbage person who was like, "Ooh, alcoholic Sunny D, let me try that." It's awful. I love it.
No, we were at the liquor store when Big Joe B's announcement came in. I wasn't buying liquor for myself because every time someone would be like, what about this? I'd go, I can just tell that it's not going to taste like soda. Or if it's Mountain Dew with alcohol in it, it'll ruin how Mountain Dew is supposed to taste, because I'm a garbage pail kid who can drink soda straight from the box. Like, I want everything to taste like soda.
Oh, I grew up with like Faygo. Like, I am a pop connoisseur, so I feel this.
I love a strawberry Faygo.
Oh, I love cotton candy Faygo because I am bottom of the barrel garbage.
One time my cousin's kid stole some like petty cash that was on like my cousin's counter or whatever, walked down to the corner store, bought candy, cigarettes, and grape soda in mass. And I was like, and that's how I know that he's one of me.
Yeah, that's a baller snack choice as far as I'm concerned. Like, somebody would be like, this was my snack choice, and be like, normal. Yeah.
Normal. That's dinner. That's girl dinner.
That is girl dinner.
That is girl dinner. But yeah, it's this whole idea of, now I think that we are, and I've been saying this ever since everything got so dark around January 6th and before.
Wait, did something like really important happen that day? Did like society change forever that
Forever?
day?
But also not. Like, it's like we were all scared, but not scared enough. No, it's just that I've been saying, like, they keep throwing fits because we're finally getting the upper hand of them. Like, kids don't throw fits because they're happy and everything's going well. Babies throw tantrums because they're hungry or they feel like you're ignoring them, or something in their environment is changing in a way that they don't like. That's what the misogynists and the homophobes and the racists are doing. They're all throwing their toddler tantrums because they can finally see down the line that at some point we're going to win and we're going to be the majority and we're going to start outspeaking them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I refer to it as a death rattle all the time. Like, that's what we're living through, unfortunately, is a very extended death rattle.
And I don't know, like, as hard as it is living through it, at least I might see in my lifetime the death of it. Like, if the death rattle is rattling, like, maybe at some point it'll just drop dead. And I get to see that and to kind of hold on to that, like, well, if climate change doesn't get us, maybe
Right.
I will get to see a female president who also doesn't take no shit from homophobes in Congress and the Supreme Court and the Senate and all of them. And just like actually see someone who's like, I'm going to take this office and maybe get us universal health care and income because we're all people who deserve to eat and have meds. Like, who'd have thought?
That's all I want to see before I die is universal health care. Like, that's my goal, is to see that, because I mean, this is obviously not like a public policy podcast, but like there's no reason. Every other developed country in the world has it. We have the technology. We can do it. We're just greedy, and by we, the society at large is greedy.
Elon Musk is greedy, and all of them are just so greedy. I did want to talk about, because you brought it up, that one of the ways that you can see change coming in the way that gender expression is expanding and becoming more accepted is through our media. And we talked briefly about Love Lies Bleeding because I love it. But one of the best examples of this I have, and I'll talk about this movie every day until I die, is the hyper femininity of Lisa Frankenstein and how she's my icon. And every day I just want to be her.
Oh my God. Okay. So I have two thoughts. I have a quick thought on Love Lies Bleeding, and then I will gladly dive headfirst into the grave of Lisa Frankenstein. So my big thing with Love Lies Bleeding is like, I'm so obsessed with that movie and the way that it plays with gender, specifically with Katie O'Brien's character Jackie, because she is a bodybuilder, but she is not mask. She is not a mask. She is a femme. She has curly hair and she wears her cute little crop tops and she's got big jewelry. Like, she is a femme, but she is a femme who is muscular. And like, that intentional decision, I think, is so brilliant. And it was making me a little insane when people were like, I love it when it's two masks in love. And I'm like, no, 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 that is a femme mask relationship, baby. That is what that is. Anyway, Lisa Frankenstein. Okay, I'm so in love with Lisa Frankenstein as a movie, as a comedy, as a horror story. But the fashion in this movie, I think, is going to live on so much further than anyone had anticipated because it is so good. And this movie is such a great example of somebody coming into their own and coming into who they were always meant to be and expressing it through fashion. Because when we meet Lisa, like, she doesn't know what to do with her hair. She feels very uncomfortable in the clothing that she's wearing, the clothing that very clearly is her attempting to like assimilate with those around her. And the more she embraces the fact that she was always meant to be this like weirdo with an undead boyfriend killing people for parts, like that was her destiny. Which is a wild sentence to say out loud, but you know what? It's movie logic. Get on board or get out. But the more she embraces the side of her, the more confident she becomes. She gets her hallway walk scene. She is so much more comfortable in her body. She's comfortable in her makeup. She's comfortable with her hair. And she doesn't look like anyone else at school. And it's not because she's intentionally being hashtag not like most girls or pick me or whatever you want to call it. She's doing what feels good for her. And she's taking risks and making choices that she never thought were going to work for her. And I just love seeing that. I love seeing her just go all in on who she is because that's how we should all be feeling. It's not about looking like everybody else. It's about looking like the best version of you because you were always going to feel the happiest when you are able to do that.
Yeah, and her name is Kathryn Newton, right? I have that correct in my head.
Yes, Kathryn Newton.
I just watched Abigail on Friday, so I'm like, I know her name. She put her whole ass into that role. Like, she was the perfect choice. Casting was wonderful. And like, give her an Oscar. I should be in charge of the Oscars because I truly know what's moving and like changing. And it isn't 3 hours of will they, won't they drop this bomb? Like, will they, won't they? Oh my gosh, the science of this bomb. No. What's moving and changing and made me cry, made me laugh, made me all of it was Kathryn Newton, like arms back, chest out in a Halloween costume and a corset being like, this is me. And I'm so confidently insecure because that's also part of my main character energy. And I loved her and I'm obsessed with her. And I also am obsessed with what you said about Love Lies Bleeding because Jackie was not only femme in how she presented, but she was like, for a bodybuilder, she was so off-brand soft in the way that she like talked and her mannerisms and stuff that I was like, I will protect her at all costs, even though she becomes giant. Like, even though she just keeps getting bigger. I will stand in front of trains for her. I will fight strange men in bars for her. I was so endeared to Jackie and Love Lies Bleeding. And I think what's so wonderful about Lisa Frankenstein is when Jennifer, I almost said Megan because it's Megan Fox. When Jennifer's body came on the scene and all the boys were like, yeah, I'm going to get hard for Megan Fox, but then hate her tomorrow after I'm done. because this movie is all about her being a hot demon who kisses girls. And it once again like centered men in the wrong way that they don't like to be centered, where it's like, you guys suck. And that's why Jennifer wants
Yeah.
nothing to do with you. Then it became this movie that like didn't launch as far and widespread as it could have from its release and had to become like a secret cult classic. All I can think about is like how Jennifer's hallway walk was coded so differently from Lisa Frankenstein's and the reaction to it. Number one, not enough people are talking to me about Lisa Frankenstein. So I don't know if people are being rude about it because on my side of the world, everyone is being celebratory about it. But the way that people were so rude about that role for Megan Fox and how she was both unworthy for it, but the perfect slut to be doing it is it's such like a little anchor point of how we view women in horror too.
I genuinely think I could write a book about Jennifer's body and its place in the cultural lexicon and the way that it was. Like, I use Jennifer's body as a verb and to describe movies that were, maligned upon release due to external factors, specifically like misogyny and the patriarchy, only to become reclaimed years later when people pull their head out of the sand. Because there's a story that Karyn Kusama tells about one of the very first like test screenings that they did of Jennifer's body, because that movie was marketed so incorrectly. They were trying to capitalize off of Megan Fox's hotness and completely downplayed the fact that that is a movie about best friends and like the unhealthy relationships you can develop with your best friends and like about toxic masculinity. Like, it's about all of these things that was not part of its marketing campaign. And so they do this big test screening, and one of the people wrote back in like, there's like 4 lines of it, and they covered all 4 lines with more boobs, MORBEWBS, like internet rot brain, more boobs. And that was a note that movie was given, that the studio was like, well, I guess we know now how to market it. Like, that kind of stuff makes me crazy. Instead of realizing, oh, they're not thinking, like, they're thinking this movie is going to be sexier than it is. It's not. Maybe we should lean into that. It's like, nope, we have to trick them because that's the audience we cater all of our movies to. Bananas, absolute banana pants nonsense.
Well, and because when I was a teenager, I was so like anti-sex, like I was just like an introvert about my sexuality and all of it. Like, I did not date. I tried to like draw attention to myself, but then like wouldn't pull the trigger when it came to be like, but what if you liked me? All of it. Like, I was just like an insecure introvert. Like, no one wants to date me, and that's fine. It's the fate of every fat, chubby, funny girl in high school. And then one day my rom-com will show up. I didn't see Jennifer. I know, right? I didn't see Jennifer.
It's very cute, but I know so many people who did that.
I know. I didn't see Jennifer's body because of all of the marketing employees. It was like, for one thing, I was a big slut shamer in my youth before I discovered patriarchy and misogyny made me hate, and then Bachelor Nation made me hate other women. I was a big slut shamer, so I was like, why would I go see this fucking slutty movie about slutty Megan Fox and all of it? And I have begged on TikTok for this person to find me because I can't find her on any social media. But if you were my friend's college roommate who made me sit down and watch Megan Fox as in Jennifer's body, as I like played with her little mouse pet, like, please DM me, call me, find me something. I also believe that I Jennifer bodied you, where I jumped the gun and abandoned our friendship because you were about to like open me up to a whole world of like badassery and feminism and loving femininity and all of it. And I instead shirked up and was like, no, I'll stay small and Christian adjacent and just wait for a man to tell me it's okay to take off my clothing. So please find me. TikTok, help, find me.
I mean, like, that's also just such a thing too, like what you have access to when what you're consuming. it does have these influences on you. Like, one of the big things for me, and I know we talked about this off air, was Elvira. Elvira was a huge deal for me in seeing a woman who is so unapologetically femme, but is in so much control and absolutely like commands every conversation, every situation in her life. Like, that was a massive eye opener to me because I was like, that's how I feel. That is the brand of femininity that I have, where it is so feminine and sexy, but at the same time, like, I believe that Elvira could like claw someone's eyes out. Like, I don't think that there's anything that is like soft about her. And Elvira, Cassandra Peterson, who plays Elvira, has mentioned many times that she views Elvira as an androgynous character because she's the inverse of what so many of these like androgynous musicians, usually these men who are still like very tough and sexy and angular, but they're very soft, and that affords them androgyny. She views Elvira as the opposite, where she's this like sexy, curvy, the outward appearance makes you think softness, but she is hard and she is very intense and she is very biting. She's like, that is what androgyny is the of that brand of androgyny, because androgyny is a spectrum, even though we as a culture tend to believe that androgyny means genderless. And in that instance, 9 times out of 10 means a lack of femininity, because androgynous clothing is viewed as unisex, because we when we say we gender clothing, what we're really talking about is we feminize clothing. We ascribe feminine ideals to clothing, and anything that is not feminine is therefore defaulted to androgynous, unisex, or masculine, which is infuriating on so many levels. But Elvira Hill, and getting to see her opened up my world of what was possibility for my own gender presentation and my own relationship with my feminine identity. And I truly don't know who I would be without her. I would have obviously discovered her at some point, but I discovered her at such like a pivotal point in my life that she was such a gateway to learning how to break down my relationship with, all of these much larger than me systems and issues.
Yeah. And uh God, becoming a horror fan and then becoming good friends with people who live and breathe horror and have since they were very young has truly like opened up my eyes about what's possible for women in film. And then I just like end up screaming at people like, everyone thinks horror is such a trash genre. It's the only thing that's like it's the only thing that like makes me feel seen about toxic masculinity and women feeling empowered and all of it, because again, they have to like center us in pain or tragedy or in violent situations to first be like, but then don't worry because you're going to get yours at the end of it. To where like romantic comedies and action movies and comedies they just haven't done for me what horror has done for me when it comes to like women's studies and being like, that is exactly how I feel. Should I be in an elevator with a guy that I don't know? Or that is exactly how it feels when I tell someone like, this really creepy thing happened to me. And someone went, I'm sure he was just a really nice guy who was like watching you cross the street. Everything's fine. You should have said hello.
First off, no, gross, never. But second of all, I think about this a lot. I think about slasher movies a lot the most. My wife Harmony and I wrote a book called Sleepaway Camp, and it is through a series of books through Die Books where we are assessing the film Sleepaway Camp and its place not only in the slasher canon but also as an unintentional queer text. It's all of that fun stuff, isn't there? So I think about slasher movies a lot, and something that I find very, very fascinating is that overwhelmingly the first installment in a slasher franchise is largely considered to be the first one. There are very few exceptions, but mostly it's the first one. And in that first one, the story is often the plight of the final girl, and it is her survival. You are forcing the audience to look at a film through the eyes of a young woman. You have to empathize with her. You have to relate to her. You have to treat her as the vehicle in which you are going to experience this world and this terror. If you do not buy into this character, if you do not care about this character, if you do not see yourself in this character, the scares are not as effective. And those movies are the best ones. Those are the ones that are very, very scary. As slasher films go on, it stops being less about the survivor and it becomes more about the weird and inventive ways that Jason Voorhees is going to kill a kid, the weird and inventive ways that Freddy Krueger is going to kill someone, the weird and inventive ways that Michael Myers is going to kill somebody. And then the perspective shifts. Now we care about these slashers. We're seeing it through the worlds of the slasher. We're excited to see what they're going to do. And yeah, a lot of these are really fun, but a lot of those movies are awful and they're not good. And we all understand, like, this is not a good movie, but it's fun. And I think that it's that perspective change. Like, it's so fascinating and it's a thing people don't want to talk about. But like, the reason that those first entries are always so good is because you are forcing people to see themselves through the eyes of a young woman. And then when you take it away, suddenly those movies get less complicated. They aren't as interesting because we already live in a world where we are forced to see everything through the eyes of a man. So we don't care anymore. And now it's just like silly fun time. All of that emotional weight is gone. And no one has thought to wonder why.
To wonder why.
Except for Carol J. Clover. Carol J. Clover definitely did. She's the author of Men, Women, and Chainsaws, which is a vital text as far as I'm concerned. She figured it out pretty early. But I have this conversation with my friends all the time where it's like, I think I can learn a lot about a person depending on like which one of the franchises they truly believe is the best entry.
Yeah. The reason why I first realized that Peacock is a wonderful streaming service that has everything I could ever want and need, including all of the Housewives, is because a friend was like, these are my Peacock logins. I need you to watch. I need you, Elizabeth Kyle, friend of the podcast. I need you to watch the last installment of the Halloween series. And I need your running commentary. At some point, Michael Myers is a medium. He's a body snatcher. He's taken over some teenager's brain and body. And I was like, why? I was like, is Michael Myers going to read my tarot at some point? Why is he a witch? When did this happen? And she goes, exactly. She's like, we've just thrown it all into the wind and been all like, Michael Myers is a demonic witch now and has always been, but enjoy Jamie Lee Curtis in all of her glory. And I love Jamie Lee Curtis and I would never want anyone else in those movies. But I was like, you guys did Jamie dirty in this movie. This is her last one.
The thing that frustrates me so much is I love both stories in that movie visually. I love Laurie Strode finally, like, you know, putting an end to this nightmare and finally like doing this. I love that story. And I'm also so deeply fascinated with the Corey Cunningham story and this idea that like Michael Myers is like this infectious thing and like his evil, you know, is passed through like the legend of the boogeyman, so to speak. Like, we are constantly inventing our own boogeymen, and like this poor kid is being treated like a boogeyman and he doesn't deserve it. So now, you know, it's people telling me that I'm a slut, so I become a slut. It's people telling him that he's a monster and a freak, so he becomes a monster and a freak. I'm so into those stories, but not in the same goddamn movie. Please split them up. Why do they do this to me? Because now I'm like, I don't like the movie as a whole. I love them as parts.
I think Jamie Lee Curtis actually just came across my feed on TikTok where in an interview she explained it. I think there's some clause written in the lore that is Halloween, or when someone inherited or bought the rights to the Halloween franchise, they were like, you can never kill Michael Myers. He is forever alive. There will be no killing of him. And Jamie Lee Curtis says, Laurie gets to kill him. Like, she gets to be at peace at some point. And so they had to like come up with weird ways, aka a body snatcher, for the spirit of Michael Myers to live on. I don't know. Jamie, call in. You're always allowed.
Yeah, I love her. She's incredible.
She reminds me so much of my grandma Peg. It's not even funny. Like, infectious. But we should probably get to our closing. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I could literally talk to you about scary movies all day. So I'm going to have self-control is what's going to happen.
All this means is that you're going to have to bring me back in like October, and we'll just like talk nothing but spooky stuff.
Yes. Yes, because I also like I was making bracelets while I was watching Abigail because I needed something to do with my hands. And Gen Con is coming up, and I like to trick nerds into being my friend by being like, here's a trinket, a trinket. Brennan Lee Mulligan has one of them, a trinket. And so I was like paying attention to Abigail, but not as much as I would if I had seen it in theaters. And at some point, I was like, my dad forgot to tell me that the twist is, once again, men are always bad. They're always the bad villain. And I don't know what's going on with Dan Stevens' career currently, but I'm in love with it. I love the hard pivot he's taken.
Get ready for Cuckoo, because it is real weirdo hour for him, and he is a delight. I got to interview him last week, and I opened it up, and I was like, I just want to talk about you playing Little Freaks and Weirdos, and he like lit up. So I'm like, oh, you are like on board. This is your favorite thing to do.
Please, I don't know, email him, DM him, text him, and be like, I was on a podcast today, and she's super proud of you. Because again, he was the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, and then
he sure was.
He sure was. And he was that very pretty man with soft hands in Downton Abbey. and now he's the burnout in the new Godzilla King Kong movie. And I was like, Dan Stevens, did you get new representation? What happened? I love it. I'm here for it.
I will say this is my last like recommendation. If you have not seen him in The Guest, which is a movie he did a while ago that not a lot of people saw, which is directed by the team from Godzilla X Kong, and also why his name in Abigail is Adam Barrett, because it's a combination of Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett. But The Guest is what put him on the map in terms of like genre stuff. It is about him. He is a former soldier. He returned home to his deceased comrade's family to be like, hey, before he died, he told me that I needed to come check in on you and make sure that, you know, the family's okay. And the family's like, oh my God, this charming soldier who knew our son, of course, yeah, come into our home. And turns out he is essentially like a human Terminator. And it turns into like a crazy action, like horror thriller. It's him and Micah Monroe, and it's fantastic, and not enough people have seen it. And he is also like grossly sexy in this movie in a way that you're like,
I just saw his chest.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, but it is a phenomenal movie. And it's also the movie that establishes the relationship that would, like, the creative relationship that would then lead him into playing so many of these weirdo roles. So recommend that one. Also, great female protagonist. Micah Monroe is great in that movie, and a banger of a soundtrack.
Damn. All right. Well, Dan, I very rarely get on a mic and be like, you know who I'm proud of? A man. But I'm proud of you, Dan Stevens. And now I want to talk to you for an hour about the King Kong Godzilla movie because I thought it was beautiful. I was like, this is Oscar, give this. This is a beautiful story. But we should move on to our last little closing out ceremony where we give the audience kind of a like, yeah, we went through all of this, and we went through all of this because misogyny and patriarchy were always playing a secret part in our lives even before we knew the vocabulary. But this is what we learned, and this is what we would like you to take away, and then we manifest for what we hope for better when it comes to gender expression and sexuality and women and people getting to just express whatever they want to express when it comes to gender performance or gender identity. So, what do you think has been your cherry on the top Sunday lesson? Like, if I had to go through all of this, at least I learned blank.
If I had to go through all of this, at least I have learned that external validation in all forms is a prison. And the best thing that you can do for yourself is to free yourself from the needs of external validation. Not just from men, because obviously that is the patriarchy at work, but literally anyone else, because everyone else is also influenced by the patriarchy, even if it is subconsciously. So the second that you learn that you do not need anyone else's opinion or approval, you will find so much peace and happiness and joy. And the best part is that it will all be on your terms.
I love that, because now my lesson gets to be that when I was a young woman who was accused by her family at all times of being vain and selfish and full of vanity and only caring about myself. And I would scream at the top of my lungs, well, it's because I know ain't nobody gonna love me like I love me. That was actually personal growth, and I was actually evolved.
Yeah. Your work, they are 2000 and late in this one.
I cannot wait to tell everyone I know. It turns out, once again, I've never been wrong a day in my life. Because again, another huge lesson that we've learned from misogyny and patriarchy is the biggest tool as an oppressed person you can have in your belt is to actually love yourself and have it have nothing to do with them, because they hate it when we love ourselves. It's the biggest way to dig at them.
Yeah, they can't do anything. You cannot shame the shameless.
No, you truly can't. And it's why I'm the woman I am today. What would you like to manifest for the general collective and the universe when it comes to gender expression or anything that we've talked about today?
The thing that I would love to manifest is that people break themselves away from the idea that leaning into femininity is inherently leaning into the patriarchy, because to do so means to give them power. So the more that we can understand that being hyperfem, being high fem is not, and like it is not an equal sign to perpetuating patriarchy, the more peace we will also have within our own communities.
Yes. Every time I put 6+ colors on my eyelids, it's not because I wanted a man to make me feel worthy that day. It is, in fact, because I have ADHD and I needed to do something with my hands and I couldn't find any of my coloring books, so I colored on my face to make myself feel like all of that money I spent at ColourPop was worth it. But yeah, like I would just love, again, I would like to manifest that one day I'm in charge of the Oscars, and I would just like I would just love if I could continue this energy of it all gets to be celebrated as long as you're not a hater. So like hyper femme, celebrated. Androgyny in all of its forms, celebrated. If we could just keep partying because we know that it pisses off the patriarchy, then we would start getting awards and accolades and movement. And if we would, and I would love for us to give up the trauma and tragedy is what formed my girlhood, and that's what makes me a woman trope. Because ew, gross. Mm-hmm. I would have loved it if girlhood for anyone, trans women, cis women, queer women, straight women, was just fucking unicorns and lollipops like they promised us it would be. But instead we have this warped idea of like it's all about heartache and men breaking you and then rising above and being tough through it, but also crying in the shower to an Adele song. Gross. I want unicorns and lollipops, but also Adele.
Nothing better than like Adele plus candy. That's great.
Honestly. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I knew that this was going to be one of the best hour and a half of my existence on this podcast and on this earth, because you're so fucking cool. If I haven't made that apparent.
Oh, thank you. I like to tell people that I'm like incredibly cool in very niche markets.
Me too. I've been writing stand-up bits and I'm like, is this going to be funny, or is this only going to be funny to Annie because we share the same dark soul? Someone will like it. But make sure that my audience can go follow you on TikTok, social media, and This Ends at Prom and all of your work, because it's fucking cool.
Well, thank you. I'm very easy to find because my social handle and everything is just my name. It's just BJ Colangelo, and all of this for This Ends at Prom is just at This Ends at Prom. Again, we're making it nice and easy for people to find me.
And don't forget, we're on Instagram at Men I've Tolerated Pod. Natalie K124 on TikTok and Instagram too. And Patreon at To All the Men I've Tolerated Before, where I tell you all of the really juicy secrets that would make my grandmother ashamed of me if I put them on the internet. But I did just behind a paywall. You have to pay for the grandma shame secrets. And remember, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything you're tolerating, including a world that will tell you that Elvira's entire career was built on the backs of men getting hard for her, when it was really built on her being a fucking badass who wanted to kick out tropes and blur lines and be an androgynous queen. I can't believe I nailed saying that. Forever and for always. Smiles are for joy.